So, with the left going insane and with all their policies failing, this is a really good time for Republicans to expand their base and to actually reach out to communities that have historically not voted for them. Whether they will have the intelligence to do that or not is going to depend on guys like Tim Parrish. I met Tim in a cigar bar. I don't know what I was doing there. It was dark. I wandered in. I thought it was a floor shop. But Tim Parrish is a Northern Virginia-based veteran, business owner, and Republican activist. He's the founder of Right Appeal PAC, a political action committee dedicated to increasing engagement and strategic messaging of conservative values to diverse communities, which is exactly what we need, and it's the key to success. Tim, it's great to see you again. How you doing?
I'm fantastic, Andrew. It's great to be on with you. And I also thought that cigar bar was a floral shop, too. So we're the same boat.
Strange, a coincidence.
Right.
Yeah, weird coincidence. So before we start, I want to play for you a montage of journalists, we'll call them to be polite, reacting to the existence of black conservatives. Here it is.
Let's be clear. Tim Scott does not represent any constituency other than the small number of sleepy, slow-witted sufferers of Stockholm Syndrome who get elevated to prominence for repeating a false narrative about this country that makes conservative white people feel comfortable.
That's an oxymoron, a black Republican.
It is so surprising, particularly coming from Ben Carson, who, quite frankly,
what happened to him?
In the African-American community and elsewhere,
Did he bang his head?
He drank the Kool-Aid.
That's what Republicans want from their Negroes.
He does not seem to understand, and a lot of them don't seem to understand, the difference between a racist country and a systemic racism.
And then Tim promptly returned to the sensory deprivation egg he calls home.
Clarence Thomas is now very, very much out of control.
Do any of you guys trust Uncle Clarence?
Clarence Thomas, that illegitimate pig.
So which is it, Tim? Are you suffering from Stockholm Syndrome? Did you fall on your head, or are you just not listening to Joy Behar? I don't know.
I don't know what it is. And the one guy you showed is Eli Mistal. And I'm realizing now that I'm one of these, according to him, Republican Negroes that are running around the country. I didn't know that. And it's actually extra confusing because during the 2020 election, I was told that based on my voting, I wasn't black. And now I'm being put back into this column of Republican Negro. So we're all confused and trying to figure out where we stand on all these issues.
It is very, very difficult. I know. I feel for you. But it's so you Right Appeal PAC. You're talking to people. I mean, one of the frustrating things to me about Republicans is they complain about the fact that they don't have minority voters and most specifically black voters, but they never seem to do a damn thing about it. What do you think they should do? What are they doing wrong? What can they do?
So let me tell you, we just discovered someone on our staff was looking at the setup of the RNC, and I might get in trouble for saying this, but we'll say it anyway because we're fearless. But we were looking at the makeup of the actual RNC, the Republican National Committee. There's one black person that we saw that is on the leadership of our committee nationally. Now, really, there's two or three, but the other two or three come from places like the Virgin Islands where, like, okay, we get it, right? You don't get any extra credit for that. And so we've not made the concerted effort to actually do the work of representation. These folks say things like representation matters, and it's important. It's important because I don't want you to just send the black guy or the Hispanic person into those neighborhoods. I want them to bear the weight of the leadership of actually, not only just spouting out values, but I want you to actually carry the weight of what it means to be a leader within those. So the RNC chair, the members of the RNC committee. So our party's just done a horrible job of actually really projecting that phrase of representation matters. We don't do it.
And what about this thing with this blanket coverage of black conservatives as being, whatever they call you? I don't know at this point, but this idea that you've somehow been captured. They even say it, that you have been you are part of the white supremacist ethos at this point. How do you respond to that? I mean, it's so crazy. How do you respond to it?
Well, the first part of that is people go straight to that because that's what they know. Let's not forget the history of the Democrat Party, white supremacists, KKK, slave owners. So they are only, affirming the fact that that's their history when they go and they say those people are captured and we don't want them to be free and free thinking and individual, have individual thought, individual liberty. They want us to just think in line with them. Look, history proves it. Our current situation proves it, that conservative values are the values both politically, economically, just in living a life in this country that work best for all communities. But they work really good for those of us that are in communities of color.
So when Mitt Romney was running, he went to the NAACP. And I had some problems with that because the NAACP is basically a left-wing organization. Like, why would he accept that that was representative? But at least he went, at least he went somewhere. He went somewhere. And he was talking to them and said, what you really need are businesses. Nobody ever went into a poor neighborhood and said, there are too many businesses here. They spent about the next 3 days tearing him to pieces. How could he dare to talk to black people about businesses when they can't even start a bank account? I think that was a congresswoman. I think it was Maxine Waters said that. Now, what should a Republican do to get around that wall, to get his voice heard over that wall? What did Mitt Romney do wrong? What would you advise him to do next time?
Yeah, and it's not just Maxine Waters. Don't forget that our vice president said that black people and minorities don't know how to get an ID. And that's why we shouldn't make them have to use their ID when they go vote. So first of all, we have to break the stigma of thinking that black people and people of color and diverse folks are too dumb to do anything, which is not the case. We can't approach it that we're government, we're almighty, we're all knowing. So we have to tell you how to do these different things. The second thing is it is important that we have representation. Culture matters, right? So people who understand the culture, speak the language, they look like the people you want to communicate with. It's important that we take those folks who agree with our values, put them in those communities to have those conversations. And then just like any other group, Andrew, we have to communicate with folks where they are, and we have to talk to them about the issues that are impacting them. I don't care what color you are. If you've got a baby that can't get baby formula, that's a problem. I don't care what color you are. If you have to drive to work and your gas prices are the highest they've been in the history of the nation, that's a problem. So we have to stop pandering to people based on their race and talk to them right where they are, right, about the issues that are impacting it. And that's one of the things that the party has got to do a better job of doing if we really want to win these communities. So
is there any natural conflict between typical conservative ideas and the life of people? Let's not just talk about black people, the life of anybody in poverty or of anybody in a bad neighborhood. Is there something wrong with Republican ideas? Do they need to re-examine their ideas, or is it a question of messaging and not selling them?
Oh, it's a question of messaging. It's a question of messaging and doing the hard work. Let me tell you a quick story about the Second Amendment and black people. I tell this to a lot of folks. The ability to own a weapon actually is what has allowed a lot of communities of color to thrive. There was a group called the Deacons Defense League back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Jim Crow era sheriffs, Democrat sheriffs, would come into towns and tell black churches that they couldn't have church, right? Their freedom of assembly and religion was not valid because they were black. The black deacons, a lot of them World War II and Korean War veterans, armed themselves, right, protected by the Second Amendment, and ran those sheriffs and KKK members out of their churches and out of their towns. And when they said, you can't have those guns, those black men said, sure, we can. We have the Second Amendment. And so conservative values, things that we believe in, absolutely are applicable and appropriate for all communities. But like I said earlier, especially we talk about generational wealth, wanting to start a business. You can't do that stuff with government regulation. You can't do that stuff when you're overtaxed. All things that the left espouses to that don't allow communities of colors, whether it be Asian, Hispanic, Black, to in fact start businesses and innovate and create jobs and send their kids to good schools in safe neighborhoods. These things absolutely make sense, but it is a matter of doing the hard work of engagement and messaging.
We were talking about crime earlier on the show, which is very high in some black urban neighborhoods. And so the cops get nailed for arresting black people. I mean, George Soros just wrote this thing saying, well, more black people go to prison than white people, and that's just unjust. But of course, the cops most cops are in there trying to protect the people in those neighborhoods from the minority of criminals. I mean, that's the truth. Right. But at the same time, I sometimes feel Republicans talk as if every neighborhood were a Leave It to Beaver, suburb where it's easy. Republicans will say things like, all you have to do is not have kids before you're married, finish high school, and you won't be poor, and get a job, and you won't be poor in America. But that is a little tougher if you have no father, if your mom is messed up in some way. I always feel that Republicans are being a little dense when they say that. Is there some way that they need to be educated to at least tailor their message, but maybe also tailor some of their policies to places where the culture is so ruinous that it's hard for people to get out?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we have done that in some ways. Right now, the Republican RNC's Black Engagement Director is a Black female that I'm friends with from Missouri who wrote a book called Memoirs of the Hood Conservative. And she talks about her cultural upbringing in urban environments and how conservatism made sense to her. And then she went back into her neighborhood she grew up in and neighborhoods that were like that and had these conversations. But it's also a matter of just talking to people about things that are tangible and impacting them. Look, Black women, when they said defund the police on the left, more Black women than any other group in this country went and applied for concealed carry permits. When the Asian community was being attacked down in Georgia after that, mass shooting, Asian women and Asian men went in and applied for concealed carry permits to protect themselves when the crime was going up. And so it's absolutely a matter of having a conversation with folks about a set of values that positively impact their life, regardless of what color they are, but that it does have an extra impact on them because they are from a community of color.
Yeah. When I wrote a movie about a abortionist serial killer called Gosnell, and when I was researching it, I was in Philadelphia, and I talked to a Black pastor there. And I said, well, do you preach against abortion? He said, I can't do that because one day an Obama might come out of my parish and he'll be attacked for having listened to an anti-abortion preacher. I thought that was a kind of an interesting idea that the politics should govern the Christian messaging. Has something gone wrong? I mean, this used to be a highly religious country, but also these used to be highly religious communities. Has something gone wrong there? Have we lost the voice of the religious in bad neighborhoods?
Well, to the person who made that comment to you, Obama had a radical pastor named Jeremiah Wright who hated his country, right? Quite frankly. And so that is a totally, separate issue all on its own. Absolutely. You've got a set of clergy and church leaders who have put more value on having members and having popularity and fame, right? Which really, if we're going to be candid, equates to money, right? And the size of their church, and they've abandoned the values that they believe in. But I tell you what's starting to happen, Andrew. We're seeing pastors more and more, particularly Black pastors, who on this issue, on the issue of abortion, have said, "Look, I can't really waver. This is a very clear-cut, biblical, scripturally supported position, and so I have to stay on this one." I'm very proud of those pastors. One of them is Bishop T.D. Jakes out of Dallas, Texas. There's been a few different bishops from the Church of God in Christ, which is predominantly Black denomination, who have really taken a hard stance on this and said, here's what the Bible says, here's what Scripture supports, and that's good. And the Black community, in turn, who is a very churched community, if you really want to reach out to the Black community, the church is a great place to start. They have found themselves in a bit of a predicament. I listened to a great pastor also out of Texas who's talked a lot about in 2020 with the George Floyd and the woke movement that came out of that. The church took a kind of a weird position on that. Now that base that they built from their wokeness is actually starting to question their allegiance to the church, and the church is also starting to question some of those positions as they have the abortion conversation and other conversations that are impacting their communities and their parishioners.
What about the larger culture outside of the church? I remember I've been in a lot of prisons doing research, and which I hate doing because prisons are genuinely horrible places. And the minute you walk in, you know you are in a horrible place you don't want to be. And you can look in the cells and you can say, well, there's a lot of Black and brown faces in here, But the real thing that links them together is every single one of them, virtually every single one, had no father. It's almost universal. Marriage has broken down in black neighborhoods specifically. The policies coming out of the Great Society, they were warned by their fellow Democrats that it was going to tear the family apart, and it did. Is there any chance of restoring that? And if there is, can you explain where that begins?
There is hope for changing that and reversing course. But I want to go back and make another historical point. What you just said about the Great Society and all the warnings, absolutely true. But a president of the United States by the name of Lyndon Baines Johnson also told us, I'm going to implement a set of policies that are going to have, quote, these N-words voting Democrat for the next 200 years. And so this was all a part of the plan. Breakdown of the nuclear family, removing fathers from our homes, black homes in particular, was a part of this great plan that we are now seeing be implemented right now before our very eyes. But there is hope for a future where people subscribe to a set of values that really, quite frankly, forget the R or the D next to someone's name. Let's just talk about a set of values that are going to allow me to thrive and prosper in the greatest country in the world. And that only happens when you subscribe to a set of values that are, aligning with things like low taxes, less government regulation, support for the police and the military, and all the things that we subscribe to on the right. As the party recognizes this critical need for us to strategically message to diverse communities and realizes the critical need for us to engage these communities right where they are, right? You hit the head on the nail when you talked about, or the nail on the head when you talked about, we talk, white picket fence, leave it to Beaver neighborhoods. No. We need to meet people where they are in their communities, in their neighborhoods. As we realize that critical need and we start to do that hard work, I think we'll start to quickly see a lot of changes happening and a lot of folks from diverse communities subscribing to the values that we align with on the right.
What about this idea of what do they call it? Institutional racism, structural racism, where even if you're not a racist, you're being a racist, and there's simply what did the New York Times say? Racism is in our DNA. Is there any legitimacy to that? Is there anything that we can learn from that, or is that just a left-wing ploy?
I think there is implicit bias, right? I think people do have that. I don't think that it's limited to white people, though. I'm a black man who will absolutely admit that I have biases, right? I was a street cop and I developed some bias, right? I was in the military and I developed some bias. We all have bias. But to say that it's one group, to say that only you white man, have a bias that makes you inherently racist is wrong, and it's not supported by any of the data. Do I think there's bias? Absolutely. Do I think that there is institutional racism? No. Now, I have a different perspective. I've traveled the world, and I've seen that this issue of racism and bias is not limited to the United States. That doesn't make it good. But I think that to say that the United States of America, the greatest country on earth, that provides so much opportunity to so many people, is institutionally racist, I vehemently disagree with that.
I got about a minute left. You're talking to Republicans. You're trying to teach them some of this stuff because they are flat-footed. It's embarrassing sometimes to watch them. Are they listening? Is anybody listening?
They are listening. It's hard work. They're not listening like, if some other groups might come in, some more institutional groups. A lot of this stuff is foreign to them. A lot of these leaders don't like change. They say, no, how we win is we just go knock doors and we just go do flag waving on the corner and that's how we win. No, it's not the only way to win. But as we provide the data for people and they start to see that these communities, even in the suburbs where Republicans used to have a stronghold, is diversifying a lot more. And as we win more races, we have a lot of targeted races this year. That right appeal, our PAC, is going to help. I think that as that data comes out, people are going to start listening, and the numbers will prove, the data will prove that what we're doing is in fact effective. People will listen even more. But yeah, people are listening and are more interested in our work, and they're really interested in putting it to the test and seeing what comes out of that.
Nah, that's great. I hope it happens. Tim Parrish, the Right Appeal PAC, trying to teach Republicans something. See if we'll find out if they're teachable. Tim, it's great to see you again. I hope we meet up again soon.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot. For more absolutely spectacular content, like and subscribe to the Andrew Klavan Podcast.